Welcome. My name is Alicia Cheek. I'm the Communications Coordinator here at NCDA. And on behalf of the National Career Development Association, welcome to NCDA's webinar series. We are pleased that you have joined us. Before we get started, I wanted to share some technical information with you. During the webinar, attendees, your microphone will be muted. We encourage any questions to be typed into the chat section, which can be found on the lower section of your screen. Our presenters will address those questions at the end of the presentation. Individuals who have signed up for this webinar will be able to log into their accounts on the NCDA website to view their CE transcripts beginning next week. Groups that are attending will need to return a sign-in sheet to me in order to receive certificates. This event is approved for one contact hour of continuing education. For any questions on continuing education, you can contact me, Alicia Cheek, at NCDA headquarters. My contact information was included in the webinar instructions email that you received this morning. I will now turn it over to Dr. Baker to get us started.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. It's sort of strange speaking to people that you can't see. However, that's the way it is with webinars. I'm Stan Baker, Professor of Counselor Education at North Carolina State University in Raleigh. My colleagues and I are presenting a webinar, as you can see on the first slide here, entitled Enhancing Career and College Readiness Self-Efficacy of Children and Adolescents. My three colleagues I'm going to move this slide. My three colleagues will introduce themselves in more detail as their presentations come up later and as they follow my lead here. So as you can see then from the introduction slide here, our goal is to introduce the Career and College Readiness Self-Efficacy construct, provide data based on that construct, and present information about evidence-based self-efficacy interventions that have been assessed via experimental designs. Two of the interventions were classroom instruction interventions, one for children and one for adolescents. The third intervention involves individual career counseling for adolescents. A common element in all three interventions is a focus on enhancing the career and college readiness self-efficacy of the participants. The career and college readiness self-efficacy construct is based on the self-efficacy concept developed by Albert Bandura and the readiness concept initiated by Donald Super and further developed by Mark Savickas. In the self-efficacy construct, Bandura posited that how strongly individuals believe they can accomplish goals or tasks will influence their motivation to attempt to do so. That is, lack of sufficient self-efficacy may interfere with achieving career and college readiness. Career and college readiness has been defined in a number of areas, and one which we've chosen for today is as qualifying for and succeeding in entry-level credit-bearing college courses leading to a baccalaureate or a certificate or career pathway-oriented training program without needing remedial or developmental coursework. We believe that if insufficient self-efficacy is an impediment for children and adolescents on the pathway to career and college readiness, then counselors are well positioned to offer interventions designed to enhance self-efficacy. The interventions presented today speak to that opportunity for counselors. We have operationalized the career and college readiness self-efficacy construct in two empirically tested inventories that you can see in the third bullet here. They were used as dependent variables in the two classroom instruction interventions, and both as the independent and dependent variable in the individual counseling intervention. The first listed here is the Career and College Readiness Self-Efficacy Inventory, published in 2012, which has been used for adolescents. And the second is the Elementary and Career College Readiness Self-Efficacy Inventory, which has been used for children. Both inventories share the same 4 factors, which provide a deeper understanding of the components of this particular self-efficacy construct, and they are as follows. The first one is believing that one can meet the procedural and financial challenges associated with post-secondary education and future careers, sometimes referred to as college knowledge. The second one is believing that one possesses positive personal characteristics that will enhance readiness. The third factor is believing that one possesses the competencies needed to be successful in the future. And the fourth is believing that one has potential to set and achieve future goals. Just I'll pause for a minute, let you catch up with this. Take this to the next. Go back. Our challenge then is to develop interventions that address all of the factors, not just one. As an aside, before I introduce our next speaker, we are aware that the concept is now more popularly referred to as college and career self-efficacy. Excuse me, self-readiness. College and career readiness. And although the terms tend to be used interchangeably, the concept remains the same. The words can be changed, but the concept remains the same. So throughout our presentation today, we have been using, and in the past several years, we've been using it in the order of career first and then college second. It's my honor now to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Amanda Allen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baker. I'll be talking to you about the study that was done in the elementary setting. Before I get into that, I think it's always helpful contextually to know the professional background of presenters. I was an elementary school counselor for 8 years, and in the past 4 years have transitioned into the role of Executive Director of Social and Emotional Learning for Johnston County Public Schools. And this role also oversees all student services professionals. So I get to work with all of our counselors, social workers, nurses, and student advocates. So it's kind of the best job ever. But getting back to this, the elementary work that we did through the lens of the ASCA national model, with looking at managing, assessing, defining, and delivering this curriculum. And of course, just as Dr. Baker already presented, we had those 4 factors that we were assessing and seeing the readiness of our students. So before we get into that though, I think it's important contextually to discuss why this is so important early on in life in elementary. And the reason being, we've got close connections to careers and relevance of schoolwork, because students are not always just overly happy to be at school, and being able to see how what they do day in and day out as students is relevant to what their lives will look like later on, relevant to their lives outside of the school building, all of those things. Those are just a myriad of other connections we can make. And then we also know from Gottfridson's theory in career that we start to see ourselves in specific roles at a very young age. So exploring careers, all careers, not just what we see our who we look up to in, is really helpful to make sure that somebody does not pigeonhole themselves in a way that doesn't allow them to explore other opportunities. In this study, we worked with 4 fourth grade classes. 2 were taught initially, and then 2 had a delayed intervention. All of them, though, took our tool, the ECC-RSI, and you'll see a sneak peek of that next, as pre and post curriculum delivery. So of course, 2 of them didn't have the delivery when they did the pre and post. And then you can see we had 50-minute per class, 50-minute classes, and then the 6 sessions were stretched over 8 weeks. And that was just because in the school setting, you've got to be flexible for different things that come up, to where it typically, like 6 sessions, if they're weekly, might not be 6 weeks. So here is how we presented the information on our pre and post test. Because we were working with students at younger ages, we wanted to have as many visuals as we could. And for our Likert scale that we had them respond, we had the little thumbs up and thumbs down mirrored here. And we also tried to adjust some of the language. Instead of using terms like post-secondary, which can seem a little bit confusing, we modified it to say, we modified this tool to say what you're doing after high school, which could be attending college, university, taking classes at community college, participating in a certificate program, or any type of career-related learning activities. But we discussed what that meant, education after high school, before we got into taking this together. And the questions were read aloud so that if anybody had difficulty reading them, that was not a barrier. And we have already talked a little bit about the why, so we'll just continue moving forward. Before each of the lessons that were put together, we always had check-ins to begin with. It might not be a surprise given my current role with social emotional learning, but there was a foundation of social emotional learning interwoven throughout. And it was really important for the structure of the lessons for everybody to have space just to regroup as they entered and to become more comfortable with that space. So we always had a check-in just to kind of get everybody loosened up and reintroduced and welcomed each time. Beyond that, the 6 sessions were structured to where we looked really high level, big picture first, and then we kept getting closer and closer and closer to where students were right then. And what I mean by that is we started out with exploring individual students' values so that they could get to know what's really important to them with a value sort. Then we took our values to apply them to what a perfect future would look like for those students. We made vision boards. And then after we made those vision boards, we used that information to help students set goals for themselves. And here is an example of what those value sorts looked like. You actually have all the words up on the screen that were on the little sheets of paper that you see in front of students. And of course, these are not pictures of the groups with whom we worked, but students had these piles of things, and just like I think we as adults struggle sometimes, it was difficult for them to get it down to a set number of values that were really their nearest and dearest. And there were lots of debates that happened throughout about, you know, how can I take this out of my top 5 and leave these other things out. So it had a lot of great information and a lot of great discussion throughout. Trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to mention about that or the goal setting. But when students worked through this and then did their vision boards and then got to goal setting, it's important to note that they were able to set goals for their personal life. They were able to set goals for their school life, which, you know, is their most applicable right in that setting because we did this in school. And then also we set goals for what their future careers might look like. So we set lots of different goals together. I thought I had a slide that talked about the things we did after that. The last 3 lessons that we had pertain to more reality focused. We had their goals set. We did North Carolina's reality check. There's a website where kids can actually go on and they can see what income they need to have a luxury vehicle or live in a luxury apartment or home and do all these different things. And that, a lot of conversation grew from that to where it was obvious that these were vocabulary terms that students had not been made aware of previously, or very few of them had. So some of those observable findings are over here, that they were unfamiliar with what financial aid was. Student loans was like, what even is that? Do I have to have one of those? You know, that was lots of fun conversation of how you get a student loan. Taxes, reality check actually equates taxes. So we were able to talk about how taxes work. So there was a lot of integration for curriculum concepts such as social studies and things like that. And then upscale housing and luxury cars, those were new concepts as well. So along with those new terms, during the opportunity for students to learn about their own values and visions and things that were important to them, it was really interesting to see students talk with one another about what their friends valued most. You may have noticed in that value sort, I think it's back just one slide, so I'll go there, that one of the options that students had in their sorts was God's will. And that was left in there because culturally it felt appropriate, and because the students with whom we worked, many of them would have put something similar on a written in note if it had not been an option. I point this out because there were a few students who actually got into an argument when God's will was in the top 5 of one student, but not in the other. So it lent itself to a really beautiful conversation of, can you still be friends with somebody who has their values sorted in a different way? And, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody doesn't value something at all if it's not in their top. And if they don't value it, what does that mean for the two individuals? So it was just a really nice opportunity to have some of these things come up while we were doing these activities together. In terms of the quantitative findings, the treatment group did have significantly higher scores. Black students had significantly, or I'm sorry, not significantly, slightly lower post scores than Latinx and white students. And then there was no significant difference between the Latinx or white students. And then I am going to hand the mic over to Dr. Martinez for the next portion. Well, I said I was going to do that because it looks like there is a Robert in our panelist section, but is that Robert Martinez?
Yeah, that's me. I'm just answering some of those chat questions really quick while you're moving.
Gotcha.
Cool. Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thank you. Yeah, so I was just answering, I believe that was Kimberly, and talking about hope theory and thinking about motivation and thinking about, you know, agency and these goal-directed like energy. Hopefully that's what you're talking about, and these pathways. Yeah, so when we think about enhancing career and college readiness self-efficacy, my study looked at aspirations, right? And as well as college readiness, their knowledge, their college knowledge, like their understanding of all of the language and all of the skills and activities in order to get themselves ready for post-secondary education at the high school level, while enhancing, to see if we can enhance their efficacy around it, right? So those are really the 3 dependent variables that we use, or I used in the study for promoting college and career readiness, aspirations, and self-efficacy, delivering it via classroom core curriculum lessons, right? And so what we did is we ran a quasi-experimental design. We did a pre-test, post-test, non-equivalency groups with 9th grade students in this rural southeastern high school in North Carolina. And the intervention, or the dependent variable, was that classroom guidance programming consisted of these 8 modules that we delivered, the school counselors delivered, versus individual learning sessions over 5 weeks. So when we think about individual, we think about just the normative way school counselors work with students at the high school level, right? What we did was go into the classrooms, purposely deliver these modules and these lessons to these kids while others were getting this information individualized. And we're looking at the effects of these treatment versus non-treatment, or treatment versus control groups. And again, one of the independent or the dependent measures was that college and career readiness instrument, that self-ready instrument. And I ran this HLM, higher linear modeling analysis, which I know Dr. Allen talked about. We ran the same kind of analysis in that study. And that analysis, or those results, indicated that the classroom core curriculum lessons had significant effects on enhancing college and career readiness self-efficacy, as well as post-secondary education going knowledge. So what does that mean? That means that students, young people that were in these treatment groups actually had their scores on their efficacy and their college knowledge enhanced. However, for some groups or for some characteristics of students, aspirations dropped, right? So what did that mean for us is that as we are thinking about delivering these lessons, we have to think about the context and our populations. So I stratified, the other thing what I did in this study and looking at treatment versus control, I stratified the samples. So I had core treatment, core control, I had honors, I had core with inclusion, core inclusion, and then I had IB and IB. So I had these 4 stratified groups, and I looked at those groups and looked at, okay, does it enhance? Like, is classroom guidance really an effective strategy or delivery mode compared to the individualized mode? And we're like, yes. Okay, so then what we do is, what I did next was look at within groups. So looking at kids that identified as Latino, Black, white, or multiracial. And what we found is as kids go through this, specifically Latinos, I'm going to focus on Latinos here, is that they come in with high aspirations. However, once they start recognizing some of the key content knowledge or the information and the tasks that need to go into getting ready for college, and recognizing some of those applications and financial applications, opportunities after high school, their aspirations ended up dropping because they started recognizing that some of their parents, as we were going through this, were undocumented or documented. They wouldn't be able to qualify. They might have been undocumented or documented. They weren't able to qualify for financial aid. So you can see that not only we have to really be careful about how we deliver these type of programming and understanding what can happen with certain students who may have some other challenges and barriers, which is related to maybe laws and policies, and specifically within states. So implications, I'm going to go really quickly with the implications for this. Is classroom lessons are really great, and we got to think about context, and we got to think about our population, and we got to break those out later on so that we can really focus on those kids that may have specialized needs and group them together. Like, you know, we think about Latino, my focus on Latinos and my research on Latinos or Latinx communities is think about those kids that are undocumented or documented, think about civic engagement, think about what does individualized planning look like on top of the classroom lessons, right? I'm going to stop there because that's a lot, right? And I'm going to go to the next slide, which I forget how that is supposed to go. Oh, somebody, yeah, there we go. So here is one way of enhancing engagement in the college process or the post-secondary process and enhancing the motivation and their confidence. And what we did was just do a mock holistic review process. So let me close this because I can't see it now. So I asked those kids that were in the treatment group to do is we broke them out into these admissions counselor roles, and each group had a role to admit to students, deny to, and put one on the wait list, right? So we had 5 different applications, and within those applications, we had them go through this holistic review process. And what we did was talk about what the holistic review process is, what does admission counselors do, what are their roles, what does the holistic review process look like when college admissions counselors are reviewing students like them, right? So one, academics, they're looking for grades, they're looking for courses, they're looking for rigor. So this brings up a lot of different conversations that are happening while the school counselor is kind of working through each group. They're picking up their hands, they're asking questions, they're actually having and signaling to each other and teaching each other. So we put them in these small groups of 5 in the classroom. And so they instead have all these questions about, oh, wow, academics. So they're looking at a student's packet that has all this information in it, and they go to the transcript. Okay, what classes did they take? What courses have they did well in? What courses are kind of not as strong? Are they taking honors? If they take AP? And then we looked at what those tests, high stakes testing. We turned the page and we looked at ACT, SAT. We looked at actually AP scores as well. What did their personal statements say? How did it read? What extracurricular activities did they have? What did the letters of rec state, and all those fun things? And then we also looked at the academic stats for the admitted freshmen for that year, and as well as, so we kind of just looked generally what they were admitted. We're looking at NC State, right? And each NC State has different clusters of students that they look at, and they kind of track them onto different kind of majors, right? So if I'm going to go into business, go there. Other schools like UNC Chapel Hill, they may not do that, right? So yes, dual courses as well, right? So we're looking for dual courses, dual enrollment. That's all part of that extracurricular personal statement kind of moment. And so what they were able to do is process all this information and go through this mock holistic review process in 9th grade in the classroom. They start actually having these vivid and discussions about, okay, this is who I'm thinking is going to be a really strong admit. This one's going to be, no, they're just not highly qualified yet. Or we're going to put them on this wait list and see how they do with another, SAT or ACT, right? That they said that they were taking. So this was pretty cool. Now we have to adjust it to today because a lot of schools and institutions aren't taking the ACT or the SAT. However, they do review those for like scholarships. So we still want to make sure that we are calling those institutions, that we are making sure that they're still using these ACT, SAT, high stakes exams for scholarship reasons. So there's a lot of different ways that you could adjust and adapt for today. This was pre-pandemic, we're pandemic, and we're endemic. So I'm not sure how that's going to look in the future, but I know schools and universities and institutions are changing. So we have to shift and persist in this kind of way of getting to our students. So yeah, I'll stop there because I think I need to stop. Good, thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Regina Gavin Williams, and I am an assistant professor in the counselor education program at North Carolina Central University. And a lot of my research background focuses on the career and college readiness of adolescents aging out of the foster care system and also their adult self-sufficiency. So that comes from two places that are near and dear to my heart. One being someone who's worked in student services and higher education, and also someone who has worked as a counselor with a lot of adolescents aging out of foster care, and also having nieces and nephews who've been adopted from the system. And one of those things that I've learned through that is there is a lot of barriers that come to as it pertains to their career and college readiness. So at the time of this study, when I began really digging deep into the literature at the time, this was around 2016, I recognized that there was kind of a widely absent gap in the counseling literature as it related to what the educational needs of adolescents aging out of foster care were. A lot of what I had to find was in the social work literature or higher education. And, I at first wanted that for my own knowledge as a professional of what to do, and then recognize that we need to really do some type of quantitative study in order to see what types of interventions would work for supporting the adult self-sufficiency and educational needs of adolescents who are thinking about post-secondary options. And so through that, my study was born per se. And so the study is called Effects of Customized Counseling Interventions on the Career and College Readiness Self-Efficacy of 3 Female Foster Care Youth. And so that particular article that came out of that study was published through the Professional Counselor, and the other co-authors on the manuscript were Doctors Baker and Williams Devane in 2018. And so one of the things that I've learned just through professional practice and through research is that when you're thinking about the needs of foster care youth, you really have to think about it from an individualized perspective. So even though the literature talks a lot about the barriers that they may face as a whole, for example, you may have students or youth who are experiencing high mobility or educational barriers within the school. For example, a lot of the literature says that they have high aspirations to achieve post-secondary success, but their educational expectations are not meeting those because of those personal and educational barriers that they're experiencing through their time in the foster care system. Things such as having access to little to no support networks, adult professionals and supports that can assist them in this process, or not knowing where to turn or where to go. So that prompted me to then look at this particular study from a single case research design lens, or ABA single case research. And so when you look at that, is when you have your baseline. And so it's before you even introduce any kind of intervention or treatment. And so for this particular study, as I designed it, I wanted to, before I go into that, give it a fun name. I wanted the students to have some ownership over what it looked like. So I named it STARS, Students That Are Reaching Success. And so I partnered with a Department of Social Services that had a kind of life skill development program that the youth were involved in, the adolescents were involved in order to help them with their adult self-sufficiency. So I partnered with them and I presented STARS. So I presented STARS from an ABA single case research design, meaning that every participant in the study had their individualized, customized intervention based off of their own needs. And I wanted to do that again from the literature perspective, but also from what I was seeing. So I had the A, which was the baseline to treatment, where I had them take the CCRSI over the course of 2 weeks in order to see where they were. I called that my pre-CCRSI data because I wanted to see which of those 4 factors they needed the most support and assistance with. Then after that time is when I introduced the treatment, which is B, the treatment phase. And that was a 6-week program. So I'm meeting with these students over the course of 6 weeks individually. And what I first started to do was I wanted to introduce their particular pre-CCRSI data to see where they needed the most support. One of the important things to note here is that even though I may have focused on one area versus the other, I made sure that all of the participants received some level of the 4 factors across those 6 weeks of time that we're together. So then after, and they completed the CCRSI during that 6-week phase twice a week. So I'm collecting data, those observation points, to see whether or not, as we're going through this STARS program, are they enhancing or improving their career and college readiness self-efficacy or not. And then once we reach the A, which is the withdrawal phase, that's me taking away the treatment. And then I'm just monitoring at that point over the next 2 weeks whether or not their CCRSI data has improved, stayed the same, or perhaps even lowered. So as you can see through that ABA, they're going through that over time. So in my particular sample, I had 3 female foster care youths, and they were ages 15, 17, and 17. All the participants identified as either Black, African American. I had one participant who was biracial. She was Black and Caucasian. And for my 15-year-old, I would say that she had very little college knowledge. You know, no one had sat her down and explained the particular post-secondary options or what she could even aspire to be. It was really working from the bare basis of, you know, what are you interested in? What is it that you desire? How do you get there? What does this process look like? And she was a sophomore. My 17-year-old was a senior. She was someone who she attended what's considered a non-traditional high school where she did a lot of her work online and she worked in the evenings. And I would say that her working after her classes, she admitted interfered with her ability to really want to succeed academically. She felt very stressed out. And at the time too, she was also having some issues with her foster parent in the home. And then our other 17-year-old, she was a senior that was in a kinship foster care placement, which means that she was living with a relative at the time. And she considered her relative to be her aunt to be a really good support network for her. So at that point, she was in the process of wanting to apply for 4-year colleges, but didn't know what she wanted to major in and didn't know the process of what that looked like, along with how to apply for financial aid. So these 3 participants were ones that, you know, stuck through the study. I did have another person who decided to leave the study, and partly because she was tired of being in the foster care system. She decided to leave the system as a whole. And so you may find that when you're working with this particular population is that sometimes it becomes so much to have all of these people telling you what to do all the time that there's this idea that I could do it on my own. So we really have to help them to know that the support that they're receiving comes from a good place to help them receive adult self-sufficiency. So again, my interventions were customized for each participant based on those pre-CCRSI scores. And I wanted to approach it from a theoretical framework. So I used 3 different approaches, one being the cognitive information processing approach, which really teaches individuals how to be lifelong career developmental learners. And so I knew that my study was only going to last over the course of 10 weeks, but I wanted them to really gain the tools that can help them to be successful in thinking about how they're going to enhance their own career development, even after the study, and know who to rely on or who they can tap in their support networks to make sure that that continues. And I also used some of the resources that come out of the CIP approach. One of the biggest being the individualized learning plan, or ILP. So in the very first session that we had together during the treatment phase, I helped them to create an ILP where we decided what their goals were, what were going to be the activities to complete those goals, what were those outcomes, and then also the time it took and how it aligned. So I'll show you an example of that. But that allowed us to keep track of what we were going to do during our time together. And it allowed the student to also have some ownership of, these are the things I'm willing to do. This is what I'm willing to explore. I know the goals we're working towards and how long we're going to spend on that. So I made sure to use that as a piece of CIP. We also use the ASCA model and social cognitive career theory. And so again, I wanted them to enhance that career self-efficacy. I wanted them to be able to know and believe that they could achieve post-secondary success. So I made sure to interweave that throughout my interventions with them. And so what I found is that I wanted to, again, out of all of this, beyond just having positive findings, I wanted them to be able to improve those educational expectations. And I'll talk a little bit about the findings in that I saw that they were all pretty much some positive findings for each participant, depending on the different factors. So I'll talk about that and a little bit of the recommendations for each of those. So I will click the next slide. So what you'll see here is a visual analysis of my results. And so line graphs or visual analysis is kind of the main mode of presenting single case research designs. Another thing that we were able to do was use software called SSD for R that helped us to kind of use a statistical analysis of what we were seeing within the visual analysis to kind of confirm what they shared. But I left that out of this presentation to just kind of share the meat here of what the visual analysis looks like. So what you can see here is that each participant has those 4 factors split within each of those graphs there. And so starting with participant 1, as you can see here, you see kind of a straight line almost. And what I believe happened here is that this is my participant who was working and going to school, non-traditional student at the same time. She rated herself, and she admitted this, she rated herself higher than what she really was during the baseline phase to say, oh yeah, I've got that. I think that's where I'm at. And as we were going through the actual treatment, she recognized, okay, this is not what I did know. So what we found here with this participant is that they were most effective in increasing academic competence self-efficacy. So she really started to become interested in how can she improve academically in order to best get her grades to a place where she could be more academically eligible for post-secondary opportunities that she was interested in. For participant 2, she was most effective for increasing college knowledge self-efficacy. This, again, is the participant who was a sophomore who really we were starting from scratch in regards to her knowing anything about the post-secondary process. What you'll also see here is kind of a dip in some of her scoring. I made sure to keep field notes because during that time she had an altercation with her foster parents that caused her to respond in a negative way to that particular week. And so we were able to talk about that, and I was able to explain that through the notes I collected. And for participant 3, this is the one that had the kinship support network, the one that applied for college and kind of had an opportunity or a pathway to really see what she wanted to do. And so this study was most effective for increasing her college knowledge self-efficacy, positive personal characteristics self-efficacy, and academic competence. And overall, it was most effective for increasing the academic competence self-efficacy. And so again, they felt that they were kind of at this lower achievement for wanting to succeed academically. They wanted to get out of school. They wanted to get it over with, but then they kind of saw the possibilities in front of them, and it made them want to do better academically or increase that. So that's where we kind of left from. And so there's many implications here for counselors working in schools and communities, and that we really have to coordinate more college and career readiness programming needs for this particular subpopulation of students, or at least connecting them or forming bi-directional relationships in the community with organizations such as TRIO programs that can really support them in achieving post-secondary access, and also strengthening their support networks, folks that they can really depend on in order to connect and relate. And then also just creating support groups, and college counselors can do that to address and normalize even their transitional challenges once they are in that environment. And another important piece too is for doing what's called CFTMs, or child family treatment team meetings, that are usually led by social workers, their social workers, to address their needs, and whether it's school, mental health concerns, or just requesting adequate assistance. So this is something I used to participate in all the time with the school counselor, the guardian ad litem, the foster parent, the social worker, to come to the table to develop a plan for them that is helpful. So that's something to keep in mind, is to bring everyone to the table in order to strengthen that support network. And then lastly, I just wanted to share an example of one of our STARS exercises, again, the individual learning plan, or the ILP. And so this one was from participant number 2, the sophomore, where after reviewing her results, we decided that we wanted to have the goals of really exploring academic majors that match career choice, reviewing the college application process in ways that they may be able to pay for college or get college paid for them. So for example, in North Carolina, having the NC Reach program, and then engaging in some short-term and long-term goal setting so that they're able to think about what are their current goals versus their long-term goals and how do they see themselves coming into fruition with that. And then also reviewing their time management skills. So she admitted that she had a little bit of an issue returning assignments on time for school and, you know, being in a place where she's able to effectively concentrate academically on certain classes. So she wanted to add that as a goal. So again, we use things like the CFNC website, College Board. We reviewed a mock application. We reviewed and explored the different types of financial aid, scholarships, and grants. And we wanted to discuss, you know, what does life look like 10 years from now? Sometimes when you're in a position where you're not able to conceptualize or look at the future even a month from now, how are you able to think about 10 years from now? So I made sure to be very delicate in this process with them on what that may particularly look like. And then also getting them to dream and think about the future. And then of course, time management strategies in order to balance school with their personal life. And so we were able to kind of sit and think about what the purpose and outcome for all of those will be, the estimated time commitment, and their goals and priorities. So again, this was an effective way to really structure our time together so that we're able to provide that support. And so these are just some of the resources that we will share with you so that you're able to really see, have a tangible resource of what we've done. And we're going on. Our studies continue. We're able to learn and gain information from what we've gathered through our research in order to think about next steps and future directions. But we did want to leave some time at the end of this presentation or this webinar for any questions that you may have for us. We wanted to leave about 10 minutes of time for any questions you may have for us so that we can make sure to answer those.
Nothing? Nobody?
If anybody has any
Anybody
questions,
home?
type those in the chat box.
Absolutely. So the one person asked, do you promote trades, military, and other non-college options? I would definitely, absolutely, yes. We wanted them to know about each of their post-secondary opportunities, whether that be trades, 2-year, 4-year military, other non-college options, because especially in this case with the population that I worked with, I wanted them to know that there's a plethora of options because sometimes they've only heard one option, right? They've only heard if you don't go to a 4-year, then that's it. And that's what one of our participants thought until we started getting into what those options are and what to do. And we played a really fun game with it too. We did kind of a career party where they were able to match the different types of careers with personalities using Holland code. And they were able to talk about what it took to reach that career. And so that gave them an idea in a fun way what those types of opportunities are. So it's definitely important to promote all options.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we even in my modules, we talked about post-secondary education, right? So education beyond high school and during high school. And that includes military trades. We're thinking about why does this matter? Why do I take a science class? Well, if you want to go into not engineering, but you want to go into a trade or a vocation in welding, right? So we got to understand not, maybe chemistry, why chemistry might be important, because you're going to be combining different types of elements to make sure that that fire, when you switch it on, you're making the right weld, right? So it's understanding how to make that information stick based off of what their interests or their goals are and their aspirations, as well as what's motivating them and how you can get them engaged in that curriculum beyond just the course. So yeah, that's what you're always doing, and you could always adjust and modify these modules, or just even the things that you're doing. Yeah, I'll be quiet here.
I was going to add to that with all the different after school options. That's definitely, you're always trying to find what somebody's really passionate about, right? So we definitely in the elementary ages tried to facilitate all conversations. And of course, sometimes it was the very first time that a student had even considered college, but with other trades, we still continued to discuss things. And for example, I know this isn't specifically about other trades, but when a student mentioned an interest in horses, we were able to find schooling specific to working with horses, which is a little bit less traditional than what students were thinking for after high school.
I think vocabulary is important here as you're presenting your programming, is that as opposed to using the term college, which will, in the eyes of a lot of younger people, make them think of only a 4-year baccalaureate degree, is use the term post-secondary education in a broad context, so that they know you're thinking about, and you want them to think about a broad spectrum of opportunities for education beyond K through 12 or beyond high school.
Yeah, and I think there's this dueling tension between college and career, right? So and when I say that, I mean, some folks think college, and then other folks are like career, but it's a combination where we need to flow between both. And, Conley, if we think about Conley and the college readiness construct, we think about, how do we get kids to pass a course on a college campus, right? With a C or better. That's what that construct is, right? So we're trying to have students think about this college construct, but also this career construct, so that they could apply it at both ends. It's just not it's not a dual or dueling kind of battle. They go together hand in hand. And yeah, we just focused on college readiness and some career stuff. And then what we do is also we can adjust it to focus really specifically on careers, trades, and technical fields. So I think once we get past this dual and dueling kind of relationship between these constructs, I think the field can kind of meet in a happy medium, if that makes sense.
We have a couple of questions. When a student is adamant about not pursuing any post-secondary education, what can be most influential in helping to change that mindset? There's a lot of stuff. I can think back to just the students I was working with, or just in the past from a foster care youth lens, where this was the case in most cases. Again, going back to the example of some who were just like, I want out of the system. I'm done having social workers, guardian ad litem, all these people telling me what to do. I just want to make money and I want to be done. And I think the most important influence in that case was connecting them to role models and people who have lived experiences that mirror, that allow them to gain perspective. So one of the things that I did for this particular study is I had a couple of youth adults who had aged out of the foster care system, who were well into their careers, come and talk with them about their lived experiences, shared their narratives, and kind of how they were at one place and got to another, just to share perspective of, this may not be your story, but I'm willing to offer my mentorship, and this is how you can do it too. And even at that place, I saw that I wasn't in that place, and now I am. And I want to use this to opportunity to plug a book by one of my actual mentees called the Black Foster Youth Handbook, that she has out right now. And she was one of those students who felt like she was done. She did not want anyone bothering her anymore. She'd lived through a life experience. And after connecting her with the proper support networks, mentoring, and opportunity, introducing her to opportunity. So she even had the opportunity to serve as kind of a student lobbyist for a member of Congress, and also to participate in foster care to success and meet other youth who were in her similar situation, who wanted to be successful. After she did all of that, she took those experiences, wanted to pursue more of that post-secondary knowledge, but also wrote a book. She wrote a handbook, 50 lessons over her experience. But that was her being connected to a plethora of people and seeing herself mirrored through people who were like her and reflective of her, to give her some opportunities and chances. So that's just one example that I could think of.
I just noticed there's a question about the Conley study. That's not in our references. I think Dr. Martinez brought it up, and it is we provided them with our the actual manuscripts, right?
Yeah, I just added a link
It's
to
cited in his manuscript. It's actually a book. It's not a study, but it's a book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just provided a link to just an overview of Rethinking College Readiness from 2000, whenever, I forget when he put this in, but a lot of that.
I think it's 2012, something in that.
Yeah, yeah. But also, when you think about students or young people who are hesitant, not hesitant, but just have different experiences, want different experiences. You think about, I work with crossover youth, kids that are dually foster kids or in camp, so they kind of go back and forth. But you think about building those relationships on radical, authentic caring, right? So just being truthful, being honest, being caring, being radical about it with them because they like that. Just knowing that they are also worth the rigor. So when they say that, like, hey, give us a chance, right? Let us get into those courses that we may struggle. Also think out of the box. Continue to encourage them, motivate them. What kind of programming can you put in place for those kids that are really impactful? What kind of people, like Dr. Williams was mentioning, is bringing in people that may connect with them, finding family members. I know we're working with family right now to help a student at one of the schools near us, one of our interns currently, who's a HVAC, and he has interest in HVAC. So to continue to motivate them and do an apprenticeship with the family member, actually, that has background knowledge of this and has his own business. They didn't realize that they can connect with each other. So that was something that you're doing. You got to think beyond the box and think what else is out there and what kind of resources and that you have for those kids, and being radically authentic with them as well.
Dr. Gavin Williams, do you want to roll it to the references on? I think you can move the PowerPoint.
Yes.
There are 2 pages, so let's just leave one up there for a while.
All right, do we have any other questions?
I'm going to have to head on out. Thank you all.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and we're at the hour mark there, so we will go ahead and end as well. Thank you again to all of our presenters and to all of our attendees today. I will be sending a follow-up email later this week that will include the link for the recording of the webinar, as well as the PowerPoint and the additional resources that our presenters talked about today. Thank you again to our presenters, and I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon.